Hello and what's up, political peeps? Per usual, I am your host, RF Kapoor, and today I am joined by a 2024 United States Senate candidate, Republican Matthew Corey. Welcome to the Geopolitical.
Pleased to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So, first, talk about your background. How did you get into? You ran for the House of Representatives, you ran for the Connecticut State Senate, and you ran twice against Chris Murphy for the junior seat as a U.S. Senator from Connecticut. Tell us more about your background and what led you into this position to run for these offices.
Well, I'm a Navy veteran. I came home. I worked for the Postal Service for a little while. I worked for the Teamsters for a little while. I started a window cleaning company in 1989. I've been in business with that for 32 years. So there isn't a city or a state that I haven't worked in or traveled through in the state of Connecticut. I got into the hospitality business in 2002, and I had a small Irish pub in Hartford, and I currently have a small bar at the East Hartford Golf Course. So I've been doing that for 22 years. I get into politics because I just seen a lot of people just lose their jobs, young kids struggling, working their way through college and still not finding work. And I said, there has to be a change. Policy has to change. Seen a lot of fellow business owners go out of business and lose their businesses, and which costs a lot of jobs also. So I just felt that the working class people in the state of Connecticut didn't have a voice. The small business owners didn't have a voice. So I got interested in running. I got over 4,000 signatures to get on the ballot as a petitioning candidate in 2012, and ran against Congressman John Larson. But I also met a great friend in the Republican Party, who was John Henry Decker, who also ran against Congressman Larson. Great man. And then I got involved. I was always a Republican. I just went out and got signatures. I didn't know how the process worked. And here I am 12 years later and just still swinging away.
So you continue to run these local businesses and continue to run for these different offices in Connecticut year by year. How do you think your running these businesses really affects the issues that you would support if you got elected, and your way of campaigning?
Look, I've seen the struggles of small businesses, especially in the hospitality industry, but I'm in the commercial high-rise window cleaning business. So I have a different view of corporate America. I look into corporate America from the outside, literally, and I see a lot of these jobs get shipped overseas. And when I had my small restaurant in Hartford, we had layoff parties where we have people that are between the ages of 50 and 60 years old, where they're too young to retire, and in most cases too old to hire because they have to cut their wages, or they're not doing the same thing. A lot of those people in my age group had got into the corporate America through the ground floor. They didn't need a college degree. And so they worked their way up the ladder of corporate America. And now they're competing with younger kids for less salaries with master's degrees. So I've seen a lot of jobs get shipped overseas, seen a lot of the small businesses due to taxes and regulations close down around me. And we can go to the capital city of Hartford, and you see a lot of those buildings are in foreclosure, and a lot of them are empty. And you hear more layoffs at Raytheon, which is the former Pratt and Whitney, more layoffs at the Aetna. And you have the lieutenant governor who was just on with Dennis House a few months ago. And when Dennis asked her, the lieutenant governor, well, what do you think about the layoffs at the Aetna? And the only response she had was, unfortunate. Well, what are you doing about it? What are you going to do about relieving the strain and the taxes on large businesses? It's okay to be pro-worker, but you can't be pro-worker and anti-business at the same time. And when the tax structure here, not only in the country, but in the state of Connecticut, it's really discouraging for small businesses and large corporations to move to the state of Connecticut. So we've had a vacuum. And I've seen a lot of the kids that all my nieces and nephews had graduated college here, worked their way through school here, but now are living in other states. And Connecticut, in my point of view and in my vision, we used to be the gateway to New England, and a lot of things used to come through. We had a lower sales tax. We had no income tax. And a lot of the companies and a lot of people wanted to move to Connecticut because it was in such a great location. We controlled the entire New England north of us. We were close to New Jersey, Connecticut, New Jersey and New York. So it was an ideal place to work and live. And hopefully someday, if we can get some great leadership and some conservative leadership, not only in the governor's office, but in the state legislature, we can bring Connecticut back to its greatness it used to be. But that was my journey, and I'm still here. I'm still fighting.
Yeah, and on that topic of the party balance, I think it's very important to emphasize that all of the constitutional officers in Connecticut are Democrats. All of the we have the Democrats have super majorities in the Connecticut Senate and the Connecticut House of Representatives, and our entire congressional delegation, all seven senators and representatives, are all Democrats. So that's not very bipartisan. In your opinion, how do you think we can bring change to that? Being with this being such a blue state.
Listen, it's just getting the word out. I mean, so let's just look at the 2024 U.S. Senate race.
Yeah.
What did Connecticut win by sending Senator Murphy back to Washington? He's in the minority in the U.S. Senate, so now he's out. He's just a divisive obstructionist of a United States senator. Instead of somebody that wanted to reach out and work with this president, we have somebody that's working against the president. You have Senator Fetterman out of Philadelphia, out of Pennsylvania, who actually reached out to the president, actually wants to work on things that are common ground that'll make Pennsylvania a great state. Why can't we have somebody from Congress reach out to the president and work on policies that are going to grow the economy, make our communities safer? I mean, that's what we need in Washington. And what we have is our entire delegation is on a Democratic ticket, and they all come home with the same talking points. But how did Connecticut benefit from that? Now, you also look on the state level. Governor Lamont just came out and said he wants to get rid of the fiscal guardrails or increase them for more spending. It's just, you can't keep spending your way to prosperity. You have to make Connecticut a place where people want to do business, where they want to grow, they want to raise a family. It's out of reach for a lot of young kids that are graduating college with student debt and they can't afford the houses and the property taxes. How do you fix that? Connecticut's been stagnant for years. We rely on the defense industry so much here in the state of Connecticut for growth, but as we're seeing, they're cutting back on defense spending. They're cutting back on jobs here at Raytheon. And Sikorsky is not long for the state of Connecticut, unfortunately, unless they can change the tax policies.
Yeah, we really need more like bipartisan, collaborative support in this state, and less more partisan divide stuff. But definitely important, definitely what you're doing. But you mentioned Mr. President Donald Trump in your answer there. I was wondering, with Trump being the kind of guiding person in the Republican Party at this time, between the Senate and the House, Speaker Johnson, Leader Thune, and Leader Scalise all follow President Trump and follow his principles pretty closely. How closely do you think you align your campaign and your beliefs with President Trump?
Look, the policies he's putting forward is bringing peace around the world. It's negotiating bad trade deals. You see what's happening now. All the leaders want to be around President Trump because they want to make deals with him. Before, they were just taking advantage of the United States. You see what's happening right now. Everything that Senator Murphy said, that we can't secure the border unless we pass this bipartisan failure of a border bill. You see what's happening now. You have about 500 crossings a day versus the thousands that were coming across. We're shipping illegals back home, the ones that are committing the most heinous crimes. So my policies pretty much align with President Trump's. Look, you don't want to agree with somebody 100%, but when they're benefiting the country, they're making our communities safer. They're making our schools safer. They're bringing jobs back. They're increasing wages. He's bringing peace around the world, bringing peace overseas. Those policies I embrace, and I question our delegation. What is not to embrace in that? And he was looking at all the fraudulent spending with U.S. AID program that President Kennedy put in place by executive order. We need to dismantle money that's being wasted all over the world for foolishness, where we need to help America first, where we have people suffering in California, Southern California, and the northwest corner of North Carolina and parts of Florida from all the hurricanes and fires and flooding. So look, there's a lot of money to be saved, and taxpayers are just tired at being $36 trillion in debt of just wasteful spending and the corruption that is in Washington, D.C. And I'm very happy the president's working with Elon Musk and the Department of Doge to find out where this waste fraud and abuse is happening. And we need a Doge right here in Connecticut to find out where the wasteful spending is.
Yeah.
If you look at our college systems and the abuse of all the administrators versus teachers that are actually teaching at our Connecticut universities, there's so much waste in all these departments. And we need somebody to go in here and talk to the men and women who are in these unions that could tell you where all this administrative waste is. They know, they see it. It's not being against, the public sector union people that are working the hardest, that are on the front lines. It's about the waste and abuse, and we need that here in Connecticut also. So yes, my policies align pretty much with President Trump, and we needed a U.S. senator down there in Washington, or even somebody in Congress, to work with this president to bring back good policy here in Connecticut that we could use to move our state forward.
Yeah, you mentioned the border bill at that point, Senator Murphy's bipartisan border bill that he supported. On your campaign website, your main border objectives were listed as to finish the wall, reinstate the Remain in Mexico rule for the asylum seekers, deport all illegal aliens who commit crimes here in the U.S., and then end these sanctuary cities and states. So this is a lot of the things that are getting done with the new Lincoln-Riley Act, and then what President Trump is kind of attacking in his first month or so in office. So if you were elected to U.S. Senate, what would your thoughts be on the Lincoln-Riley Act, and would you work to pass it?
Absolutely. And you see what he's doing now. He's got Canada, the prime minister, making sure there's military troops to keep that fentanyl from coming down through our northern borders. He's got Mexico's president working alongside him, making sure there's Mexican troops along with our U.S. troops to make sure that we put an end to the drug cartel down there that are trafficking children, trafficking drugs through our country. That is a beautiful bill that should have been passed bipartisan, and it's great. I mean, there was definitely some Democrats that voted for that, and I was very happy for that. I don't know how much of our delegation voted for that, but it's a common sense bill, something that needed to be brought forward, and we need to get rid of the people that are committing the most heinous crimes, not only in Connecticut but around the country. And it's unfortunate that our governor has said we will welcome anybody that's here illegally. Does that include people that are child trafficking, drug traffickers? I mean, we are housing and putting up people in housing and schooling and using our medical system to house these illegal immigrants that are committing the most heinous crimes. It's unacceptable.
Yeah, and I was actually listening to a speech with Attorney General William Tong here in Connecticut, and our constitutional officers are working to protect the illegal aliens and illegal immigrants from ICE officers. Well, in reality, shouldn't these officers be working with ICE officers to secure our border and make our country safer? Now, you did say that you were in support of many of President Trump's legislation and executive orders in Mexico and at the border. Given this, would you support President Trump in putting 25% tariffs on Mexico like he was originally going to do earlier this week?
Listen, the tariffs, we all hope they don't go through. But what we need is fair trade deals. And the only thing in the power of the executive branch to do is threaten tariffs. But you see what it's done. It's brought the UK to the table, it's brought Mexico to the table, and it's brought Canada to the table. So look, we are shipping jobs overseas. Just like President Trump said, instead of building our trucks and cars in Mexico or building our trucks and cars in Canada, they could be sure well built here in Detroit. So we need fair trade. How many cars? They got 100% tariffs in the UK on any American-made car. So to call out the United Kingdom for the backwards trade deals that we have, tariffs are a great thing to put in place to say, look, or the threat of tariffs, it brings people to the table, it brings people to negotiate. And you see how fast these world leaders have come to the table. Look what happened with the president of Colombia, who refused to take back their illegal immigrants with the threat of tariffs to Colombia. How did that work out for him? Now the president of Colombia is even offering to pick up the people that are committing crimes here in the United States with its own presidential jet. So these are strong arming the right policy. This is what you call leading from the front, not behind, not waiting to react, but making other people react to you. And so I think the president's doing a wonderful job at great neck speed.
So I understand that you're in support of using tariffs as leverage for our executive branch and our current administration. But would you be in support of actually using these tariffs up to 25%, as we've seen being proposed in China, Canada, and Mexico? Would you actually support the use of these tariffs if necessary?
Absolutely. Yeah, look, we're going to, like the president said, we're going to feel pain for a little while, but when it starts leveling out and things start being made back in America, that'll work out for everybody to work out for the US economy and the US workers.
Understood. And I do want to transition from this to talk about a topic. Recently, back in December, the All Aboard bill was passed by Senator Ed Markey and Representative Chris Deluzio of Pennsylvania and Massachusetts. So public transportation is at the forefront of many national initiatives, and it's something that's very important in building communities, and it's an equitable means of transportation for people across different socioeconomic uh, state places in the United States. So Republicans haven't necessarily been known to jump up and down for public transportation in the past, but I know you've talked about in some interviews the importance of public transportation and how it helps bring communities together. So what would you do to ensure that public transportation is something available to people that need it?
Well, that's for infrastructure. And we all need great infrastructure, especially here in our highways coming up down the routes of I-95. Now, public transportation is great if you can get people off the highway. But what we want to do is we want to get a lot of those tractor trailers off the highway. We have some of the largest ports. We have a large port in Bridgeport, Stamford, New London, New Haven that are being underutilized for shipping. And we could ship a lot of those goods bypassing 95 by using that. But also, the high-speed rail is definitely what we need. I mean, we are centralized in between New York and Boston. If we had a high-speed rail that could connect Hartford to Boston in a faster way instead of going all the way down to New Haven, that would be a wonderful thing. I think Springfield is working on bringing that Boston to Springfield, but if we can do some Hartford to Springfield to Boston, that is going to create economic growth. You need public transportation if you have jobs. The public transportation we have here in Connecticut with that busway that they spent $600 million on, it's not carrying enough people to own its weight. So until we start creating jobs and putting jobs back in our capital city, you can have all the public transportation you want, but if it's not hauling workers to the necessary jobs that they need for affordability, it's useless. But you need to create that working environment and to grow the state.
And how will you do that specifically? How would you plan to create that working environment in the state where people are encouraged to go back to work, people are paid enough to go back to work? I know you've been an advocate for no tax on tips, so that could be an aspect to get people to go back to work and go and work at restaurants and stuff. So how would you get that to happen? How would you allow people to go back to work?
Listen, it's about the regulation and taxes. You have to make Connecticut business friendly. I haven't seen too many large corporations want to come down here and want to come into Connecticut and make it happen. It's just they're just not attracting the jobs. Now, we don't have the electrical infrastructure to do that because of our electrical rates are so high, but we need to lower our electric and energy bills to bring manufacturers back to Connecticut. Not only that, data and AI, we don't have the infrastructure. Even if we had the electrical, we don't have the electrical grid. So we need to focus on the infrastructure here in Connecticut to update our grids for data centers, all of that kind of stuff, infrastructure we need to do. And we'll put people back to work. Not only our great union construction workers, but our white collar and blue collar workers that just want to go to work in those industries. And that's what I would advocate for.
Understood. And I'm going to transition one more time. I want to talk more about your electoral history and if you will continue to keep running. So, just taking a look at the races that you have run in the past, you ran this year in 2024 for U.S. Senate. You ran against Senator Chris Murphy and a couple other unaffiliated candidates. You did very well in the Republican primary. You won with 54.7% of the vote. And you have consistently done very well in the Republican primaries for the House of Representatives races, excuse me, that you ran in the past, and the senatorial races that you've ran in the past. And a lot of people have attributed this to simply since the Republican Party voters are such a much smaller majority in the state of Connecticut to the amount of people that you know as a candidate. So, how do you think you've done so well in these primary races? Do you think you can attribute it to the amount of people that you know and your connections in the industry?
I think it's just being true to who you are, not wavering on your convictions. And I don't want everybody out there that's listening to me to agree with everything I say 100%, just like I don't agree with President Trump on 100% on things. I'm sure I could find some things that I wouldn't agree on him with. But as long as you're true to your convictions, I'm a conservative at heart. So this is who I am. I lay it out there. And it's just, that's who I am. And I try to reach across all spectrums, whether you're an independent, a Democrat, Republican. The votes that I got, I think it was the largest vote that a U.S. Senate candidate has gotten in the last 10 years. So I think we've done pretty well with the little bit of money that we had. If we had a few $1 million, I don't come from a multi-million-dollar background. I just come from a blue collar working class background. And so I do what I can do. And I built some name recognition over the years. But I think I've been just true to my convictions, and that's how I proceed to just keep going. And I'll support. I've been supporting the Republican Party ever since I got involved in politics over 12 years ago, actively involved. So I stay involved. I haven't been a candidate that runs and just runs off and enjoys their life. I try to enjoy everything I can, but I do enjoy trying to help people out and help our state out and our country out.
Yeah. So, continuing on this topic, you have always won about 38-39% of the vote between when you ran for US Senate in 2018, when you ran for state Senate in 2020, and then again in 2024 when you ran for US Senate again. So with your percentage of votes won remaining very similar, how do you think that your race and your opponent in Chris Murphy has changed over the past 6 years from when you ran in 2018 to when you ran in 2024?
Well, look, he ran for cover. When we had the debate, it was already 9 days into early voting. So if you look at the vote spread, 300,000 people have already voted going into that debate. So we already knew that he couldn't defend the policies that he embraced from the Biden and Kamala Harris administration. But what are we looking at? We're looking at 1/3 of the state is on some sort of federal or state assistance. You got the largest employer in the state of Connecticut is the state of Connecticut. And so the people that are on public assistance, they say, great, if you want to force me off public assistance or you want to take away my public assistance, what job opportunities are out there, whether it's Hartford, Bridgeport, Stamford? I feel for them. I've worked in every single city in the state of Connecticut. And with my companies, I've had young kids come up to me, ask me for work. Are you hiring? There's the job opportunities out there are very slim. And so there's fear in families out there that they're going to lose their assistance. So that in itself needs to be changed where we can keep people on public assistance, but also make sure that they benefit from a great educational system that I know that is failing. Our public educational system is failing, and it's not due to the teachers. Sometimes it's due to the teachers union, but they don't have the tools and the material. And people coming from broken families and criminal backgrounds, these kids, they just don't have the resources they need to better themselves, and a lot of the families don't. I've been into a lot of these communities, and it's just heartbreaking. And so that voter base, if you look at where most of the votes came from, it's mostly on the inner cities and people that are struggling. And I get it. And I just hope that, we can change some hearts and minds. And I believe I could have done that if I had a little more time and a little more money to go out there and reach out to those communities to say, look, like President Trump said, what do you have to lose? I mean, things need to change, not only for your generation, but for your kids and your families that want to grow up in Connecticut, that want to make sure our cities are safe to grow up in, want to make sure you have a great educational system so you have the tools you need to get into the workforce that's needed out there. And, I can sum it up to a lot of other things, but, it's unfortunate that politics sometimes comes down to a lot of money, especially when you're running for federal office. It's so hard to take an incumbent out. But once again, we'll look back and say, what did Connecticut actually win by sending Senator Murphy back to Washington for another 6 years? He's in the minority of the United States Senate. He's going to be an obstructionist and a divisive senator for the next 4 years. Connecticut won nothing. unfortunately.
Yeah, but you mentioned people on assistance and how that was a third of the votes that you think that went to Senator Murphy because they think that the Republican Party may not be as interested in providing assistance to these people or advocating for their assistance. But would you be able to commit that you would work to ensure that these people have their government assistance until they can get on stable footing and get a job or something, which is something you guys could work
Absolutely.
through as well?
Absolutely. There needs to be welfare reform. There's a lot of broken families. I had a lot of young kids work for me that, that were paying child support. They weren't living at home with their significant other, their baby mamas. And it's a shame because that's the dissemination of the family. You need a father and a mother a lot of times in these family situations. And it's unfortunate the way the welfare system is set up. That's not that doesn't factor in, because what they do is they take a 2-income family and they adjust it on that. And look, you need to give people and keep people and give them public assistance to make sure they're in a safe place, but also give them the tools to grow and maybe get off this public assistance at some point in their life. And that's a shame. There's not that opportunity here in Connecticut, or there's not enough politicians looking at that to make sure that happens.
Yeah, and looking out, given the numbers that we've talked about, with you winning approximately 40% of the vote in the past couple of races that you have won, that you've ran in, excuse me, do you plan to run again? I know it's super far out, but do you plan to run again when the seat is up for re-election in 2030? Or
Probably
do
not.
you? No, you
Not for
don't.
U.S. Senate. No, sir.
Why, sir?
Oh, listen, I believe I put it out there, and I'm hoping I paved the way for another candidate to come through to take the reins and hopefully win a U.S. Senate seat. Doesn't mean I'm going to stay out of politics. Not saying I rule anything out, but as far as the U.S. Senate race goes, I think there's some people that could step up and do a great job. I mean, we're talking 4 years from now is when Senator Blumenthal is up for re-election, and 2030 is Senator Murphy. But look, we need a change in Washington. We need just one Republican down in Washington to show the state of Connecticut there's a different perspective. And not only that, it would keep the media honest. They won't be able to come back with the same narrative. They would have to question the candidates, question why they voted for something and why they didn't vote for something. And so that's what we need. We need that in Washington. We need that dearly for the state of Connecticut.
And you've been a great candidate, and for a long time you've been in politics. Given that you won't run again in 2030, would you consider running for a House of Representatives seat in the United States or some state offices?
I don't rule that out. So,
Okay. Yeah.
I think, there's a place somewhere for me to advocate for a better Connecticut and a better country. So I never rule that out, RF. So.
Yeah, and I want to touch on one last topic before we kind of wrap up today. Connecticut has been affected by the topic of gun control and community safety for a long time, and your opponent, Senator Murphy, has been a huge opponent to the Second Amendment, as many believe, and he has essentially been advocating for more gun control and assault weapon bans, etc., because of how hard-hitting the 2012 December Sandy Hook shootings were to the residents of Connecticut, particularly in Newtown, where the Sandy Hook shooting took place. So, given that you've ran in Connecticut many times for office, what would you do to find a middle ground where we can honor the Second Amendment and understand the importance, which is something that your opponents have not always done, but at the same time ensure safer communities for people across the partisan spectrum in the United States?
Look, it's backing our law enforcement. It's making sure that our school systems have police officers or resource officers that Senator Murphy wanted to pull out of the schools. It's about training people, making sure there's gun safety out there. But I'm a pro Second Amendment advocate. I don't believe in removing whatever definition Senator Murphy has on assault weapons. I served in the military. I understand weaponry. Look, I'm a Second Amendment advocate, but there definitely should be some gun safety training, but school resource officers making our community safe, enforcing our laws where people have access to weapons that shouldn't have access to weapons, making sure that they get arrested and they get put in jail for having firearms that they're not supposed to have. Senator Murphy's been running on this 2012. Unfortunately, that's the only way he's been able to raise millions and millions and millions of dollars. And, when we ran against him in 2018, he was taking advantage of a lot of the shootings that were happening around the country, especially the Parkland shooting, where he's raising millions of dollars on tragedies. And I just think it's unfortunate. And you hear his policies down there where he wants to remove school resource officers and doesn't want to work in a bipartisan manner. It's a shame. So that's the way I see it, and that's the way I see the senator operates down in Washington.
Yeah. Prior to election day, I sat down with another person who was on the U.S. Senate ticket here in Connecticut, Mr. Robert Finley Hyde from the Cheaper Gas Grocery Party. He mentioned something similar to you, but a little more extremist in a way. He mentioned that he was completely opposed to universal background checks, and essentially that you can walk into a store and just purchase a gun without any form of background check. Do you agree with that?
We have background checks. I think we all need a background check. We want to make sure that people that are mentally unstable we don't want firearms in the hands of the people that shouldn't have them. So I'm for background checks. I'm not for complete huge background checks. We already have a federal law in place now that you have to go through a federal background check. So what we have in place is fine. It's not adding more laws. It's enforcing the laws we have on the books as we speak today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Corey. Learned a lot today about your stance. I hope to see you on the ticket again in the future. I think you're a very strong candidate, and thank you so much for joining my show today.
God bless you, and thank you for having me. And keep up the great work. Yes, sir.
Political peeps, thank you so much for watching. This was Mr. Matt Corey, candidate for U.S. Senate 2024. Peace out, dudes.